closing commentary on the voting thing. Try to get through it really quickly because it's my 5th video on this topic, and I usually like to do one per video. And I was going to leave it, but today I had some free time, so I went from from A to Z, and no way, not leaving it. Certain things need to be pointed out about the criticisms, or reaffirmed, because the first time I I refuted the not refuted, but once I simply mentioned that the criticisms aren't really applicable in every single scenario, it was just ignored. So the top criticism is the fact that there's a lot of countries with hugely religious populations that would simply laugh at the questions being proposed. And I never said this would have to be voted in tomorrow, much like there's other things that atheists talk about, which we know practically there's no way we're going to get it voted in right now, but I'm just saying as an idea, it's a rational thing. And then again, there's other countries, like I mentioned in my, by the way, there's, for instance, Sweden. I don't really see the Swedish population being outraged at any of these questions. No, I think they're going to think they're pretty good questions, and a lot of other countries as well. So what about those? Alright, so secondly, the fact that I mentioned, we would have to have paragraphs. And the countries as big as, paragraphs in the test, answers consisting of paragraphs, not just a multiple choice. And countries like the US, maybe that's not as practical unless the voting turnout is really low from what it is right now. But let's keep in mind that, for example, Florida in 2000, they did the recount and they hand counted the votes. So if they can do that for a state as big as Florida and a lot of counties, there's countries that are much smaller than Florida, which if they can do a hand count of the votes, I'm pretty sure they can read some paragraphs as well in small countries. So again, small countries, atheistic country, secularistic, populations, very practical. Thirdly, Ojama Flipper, just mention him for a bit because he did a video, and good video. I like a lot of what you said, but you mentioned that I said in one of my earlier ones to you that I didn't feel that there was a need for government to be fully accountable. And I never said I didn't think that was a necessity, but I simply said that I said it's not practical, and it doesn't really, there's no connection to accountability of, it's just a separate issue to the voter ignorance issue and the stranglehold it has on shaping policy. And you mentioned the olive branch. Well, again, it's a political disagreement we had, an ideological one actually. So using a term like olive branch, it had nothing personal. The fact that I didn't take it, it's just, again, I thought the olive branch consisted of, it didn't really have anything to do with my issue. I still like the accountability that you brought up, but again, it's a non sequitur. So that's why I sort of brushed it off, because I'm just focusing on the voter ignorance. We have, for instance, landed immigrants are not allowed to vote. They have to become citizens. And what do they have to do to become citizens? Oh, that's right, they have to write a test. So there's this presumption that if you were born in a country, you don't have to write that test. There's just this presumption that you're going to know what you need to know. And I'm just saying, let's think about that for a bit, because in my experience, a lot of the landed immigrants that I've dealt with, and compared it to some of the people that are born in this country, there's a pretty huge ratio of people, landed immigrants knowing a lot more than the citizens that are always born in the country. So I'm just saying, why not have a test in every case? Why only have a test with the presumption that the landed immigrant is always, in every case, going to need to qualify? So I'm saying, let's have a test in every case. So, as well, the 18 and under thing, nobody challenged that. Why is there this presumption that every single human being under 18 is incapable of casting a vote? Why do we do the age restriction? Why do we do the geographical restrictions? Why not base it on demonstrated knowledge? we do it in every other scenario. And the fact that people called it racist and elite as well, Highlander pretty much explained that away, why it's not racist. It's not targeting any specific group of people, because everybody would have to write the test, anybody who wishes to vote. And yeah, some people have rough childhoods or something that prevents them from acquiring an education or something like that. Well, then we can go a bit easier on them in terms of the kind of test that they would write. They wouldn't be held to the same standard. They can prove that they had a rough upbringing and were deprived of an education and stuff like that. But again, I don't think the kind of test that would be written, it wouldn't be that complicated of a test. So scratch that. No, everybody would be held to the same standard, same questions, because to get an education of the kind of questions that would be asked in the test, you really wouldn't have to do that much research. It wouldn't be a complicated test. And as far as who would write the test, well, yeah, there would be a ruling, much like there was a ruling on who writes driver's license tests, who writes these immigrants tests, when they have to become citizens, official citizens. I mean, somebody writes every test. So obviously it's a different process in every country. I'm not exactly familiar with how it works in the US. But yeah, I mean, there are tests that are being written all the time, important tests. And somehow in this issue, voter knowledge test is somehow going to be completely out of reach as far as disagreement goes and what kind of questions will be asked. I don't think so. And if a country like Sweden does it first, and then a country like US, because of their overwhelmingly religious population, does it second, and then they impose religious questions on the test, well, fine. I mean, let's go one way. But this, shifting going all sorts of different ways, it doesn't work anymore. I mean, I'm freaking sick of seeing nothing change. So yeah, if a country has an overwhelming religious population, well then maybe, even though it's a secular country, if people want to defend the fact that it's mostly a nation of Christians, well then fuck the fact that it's a secular country and let them have their own policy. And the people that don't like it, well yeah, get the fuck out. I left Serbia because I didn't like the overwhelmingly religious population, and I didn't like the laws that were being passed because of that. So now I moved to a secular country with rational laws, and there's still a lot more laws that aren't passed. Euthanasia is still illegal here, and I'm freaking sick of seeing nothing change because of there's still this presumption that if somebody wants to kill themselves, that they must be out of their fucking mind. But again, I'm just shifting away now. The fact is that there's every single criticism that was made, it was either a technicality or it was pretty much endorsing ignorance. It was saying, well, if some guy who's always been able to vote wants to keep voting, well, who the fuck are you to tell him to stop voting? I mean, I can't see that as anything other than an endorsement of ignorance. I mean, why? Why in this case only? Does everybody need to have a voice? I mean, that's not reality. I mean, reality means that there's going to be a hierarchy everywhere. And in this case, people just don't want. I mean, people spend, especially in this community, people go on and on and on about how there's people who are just completely out of reach. You can't reach them. Their mind is elsewhere. And it's just interesting that the people who oppose this the most venomously, my idea, are those kinds of people who do know just how fucking out of reach the majority of people are. And yet they keep defending this idea that somehow it's our fault that we can't convince them that they're lunatics. So that's all. There's probably a few other things, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. But this will be the closing statements. And I'm not looking for responses. I probably should have mentioned at the top of the video, if you're somebody who disagrees with it, who's disagreed with it from the beginning, no need to watch it. This was, mainly targeted at people who were either in the middle or either had some second thoughts after seeing some of the, the attempted rebuttals that were made towards me. But I mean, I don't want any more video responses. I didn't mention anyone by name. Well, I mentioned Ben, because it was just, you know, a little personal thing. But you know, anyone else? No need to do responses. No one's on board with this idea anyway. So yeah, this will be the end of it. But I did just have to address some of the things because they were quite synthetic.